Mustafa Kirwan is a multidisciplinary designer and educator with expertise combining urban planning, architecture, product design, and new media. Currently based in Beijing, he is director of branding with Rainwood Group, a Chinese multinational enterprise working on a number of large-scale real estate developments, and co-founder of Design Beijing Lab, a technology research initiative at Tsinghua University in collaboration with Parsons, the New School for Design. Focused on the integration of physical and digital systems for urban applications, the lab is currently developing several innovative projects, including a cloud computing interface for an IT campus cluster, an eco-urban operating system, and an urban mobility interface for the Beijing workforce. Prior to moving to Beijing, Mustafa was creative partner at New Work, a 30-person real estate development and urban planning firm with offices in New York, New Jersey, and Sharjah. Earlier in his career, Mustafa worked in several renowned international design offices, including Sotheby's Association in Milan, Fitch in London, and Mercado and Salvetti Architects in Boston. Since 1996, he has been adjunct professor at Parsons, visiting faculty at the Harvard Graduate School of Design, and guest lecturer in many international schools and conferences. He received his undergraduate degree in Architecture and Fine Arts from Rhode Island School of Design and performed graduate studies at the MIT Center for Advanced Visual Studies. His permanent residence with his wife and daughter is in Manhattan. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to IAPEX. I'd like to make sure everyone can hear me, and wanted to thank Sayem Goyer for inviting me and the IAPEX committee. Very happy to be able to present today. This is quite an honor, and it's for me to be able to present to you in Karachi from Beijing. I thought this was a good expression of the idea of no boundaries. So this is the future where we're going to be working together virtually and physically. So I think today is a affirmation of this ability that we now need to work in a global capacity. I'd like to also mention my name Mustafa is also, I believe, representation of the fact that as an American I embraced Islam, which I think is also an indication that the world can share and can become more integrated in how we understand each other. This is the spirit of what we need to achieve together. I wish I could physically be present, but I think the opportunity to be connected through different means is the future. And we all need to be open to how we can collaborate across different levels, platforms, and institutions and disciplines. So that's the spirit of what I'd like to present today. I believe you're on slide 1, so maybe we can quickly go to slide 2. I'd like to introduce some of the theme keywords, which may seem very complicated, but for me, it's important to give you a vocabulary of some of the words that I'm dealing with and some of the words and applications we're developing. So everything from artificial intelligence to data visualization to context-aware systems for urban spaces. New technologies are allowing us to integrate the physical and the virtual environment. And all of these different activities and technologies we're using is how architects of the future and the present are needing to become more aware and more involved in the technological revolution, as this will shape the future. Slide number 3. I'd like to quickly mention the methodology. One of the ways that we're working in practice is combining the human factor, the people, with media and the city and the architectural space. So this interaction between the 3 dimensions, people, media, and the city, is the focus of my work, and this idea of the convergence of technology and the environments. So media people, and city are the three layers that we're trying to bring together in all of the projects. Slide 4, please. Part of that is, as I mentioned, the physical and the virtual, or the physical environment in the information media. Each has its own parameters in its own, we could say, its own medium, whether that's the patterns, the boundaries, the landscapes, or the different environments that we're working in, whether that different type of experiences. I like to also think about during the day and nighttime, there are different experiences. For example, how we need to mediate the physical and the virtual space. The media touch points, of course, the user is moving through time and space and is relating to different touch points, whether that be physical environments or digital environments. So we need to consider these touch points of the user experience. Slide number 5, please. There's a couple of opportunities I've had to present an application for the digital and physical convergence, but we wanted to give some idea of what is this in terms of the practice of urban planning and how does this relate. So I developed this four boxes, which is to make the community a new community, we need the sound urban planning. That's a combination of the government's involvement as well as the policies that designers and planners are using. We need great design, and we need integrating the media into the space. So, for example, on the slide with the map, we're looking at an integrated media platform that relates to the physical buildings, to the physical campus. This happened to be a medical campus in Germany, and we were developing how do we integrate the different types of activities, living, education, entertainment, retail, into the experience through the digital network. Slide number 6. So the combination is how do we bring the hardware of the physical environment with the software, the people, activities, and the media. I wanted to give a more concrete example. I presented this to the developer because unfortunately a lot of developers are still not getting this idea. The real estate developers are very, we say, brick and mortar. They're not yet embracing the virtual dimension. But when I compared the construction cost and the time frame to do a development, for example, the physical dimension, the cost could be $500 million, for example, for a large project. The actual cost for the virtual would only be 5 million. So it's 1% of the cost of the total development could be developed for the virtual platform, which could actually start before the construction so that you could start developing a virtual community of the inhabitants, and you could start developing the network and the environment so that people could begin interacting before the project physically is built. I tried to show this combination. I think it's quite viable. Slide number 7. So I want to just show some examples of the work we've been doing in the research capacity, both in the university and some physical projects in the professional level. But number one, some of the methodologies that we use, the development, is data collection and analysis, the urban layering, architecture, placemaking, media, and identity, meaning branding and marketing strategy. And then how do we connect this through the interface? How do we intervene with the technology into the physical? So next slide, number 8. Patterns. We have worked on many projects to use mapping systems to visualize the activity and the behavior of the system. This particular slide is showing the activity of the school system. These are all schools, and the activities including transportation, the student population, all of these activities within the physical environment can be mapped through the digital. Slide number 9. are patterns. We've been studying patterns of behavior. These are forming both visual, the physical, and the digital patterns in cyberspace. Slide number 10, mapping time. We're looking at how things relate in both the global dimension of time, mapping time of, for example, travel, or mapping time in programming urban spaces, which means in the morning there's different activities in the daytime, in the afternoon, and at night. We need to look at how cities transform during different times of the day and the different populations and demographics that inhabit those spaces, and how do we meet those demands with the digital and the physical environment. Slide number 11 is working with GIS systems to map different scales of patterns and activities. And as we're connecting this more and more to GPS, we can look at very complex and dynamic data of cities. Slide number 12. I've worked, was one of my most interesting projects to develop for the New York Stock Exchange. We called it the computer system, the whole operating system, which is how do we map the entire system structure and we call the typologies of the system. This is what I teach, called information architecture. This relates also to navigation. How do we move through the city? There's a new term maybe you're familiar with called urban mobility, which is looking at how do we link all of the intermodal transportation into a fluid system. Currently, we're working with Volkswagen Group here in Beijing on a project that links together intermodal transportation, which I'll go into more in the project later on. Slide number 14. We've also been developing what we call the mapping communication touch points, looking at within the system how do users and interact with all the different data points. For example, we were mapping out the highway and where does the user meet all of the touch points, which could include toll booths, billboards, it could include signage, it could include mobile media points. So all of this is part of the integrated media experience. 15, slide 15. Part of understanding is the sensory abilities that we have, whether that's sight, sound, or the cognitive processing. So we need to look at the sensorial interface, how we relate to the environment through the senses. And we've been working on ways to map that. Slide number 16 is further looking at, we call the cognetics, how the mind is able to process the information in fluid ways. As the city becomes more digital and becomes more real-time experience, we need to look at how to map this. Number 17, slide number 17. But it all comes down to the users. I think one of the problems I found at MIT in my time there was that the scientists and technical people tend to be very good at the technology, of course, but they're forgetting some of the human factor. So we really need to understand the human factor. Who's our audience? What are their sensitivities? What about the multiculturalism? I think that's a big part, as the theme of this conference is to being able to tap into the multicultural different points of view, which I'll go into a little bit later. So slide number 19. I'm very focused on creating experiences by looking at the market conditions, looking at the content, looking at what's shaping the environment, whether that's through education, through hospitality, and understanding what are the current trends that we need to design for. These are some of my research slides that I do for every project. I try to give an immersive experience into what is the purpose of the project, what is the program. I think architects call this, we call it the program research. Slide number 20. So just quickly into mapping at different scales, urban planning and mapping from the macro point of view, from seeing the transportation linkages, the patterns, what are the key points of reference. And slide number 22 is looking at also the multi-levels of the city, of the development, whether that's looking at the vertical programming. I think it's a new trend in buildings, is not only making buildings that are one-dimensional like an office building. There's a big trend now to make multi-functional buildings at every floor. So we have to think about the verticality as well as the zoning. All of this is part of the mapping of the urban space and the urban activities. Slide number 22, just an example of one of the projects. So in Beijing, in Shanghai, that we developed this multi-user experience which integrates digital and physical environments. Slide number 23. So now I'd like to move into 4 projects comparing 4 different cities. So I think you're going to see a quick animation on slide 23 about New York City at the different scales. And New York City and Manhattan, I've seen analyzed it really as a linear city. It's based on a grid. I think many of you know Manhattan is a grid, but at the same time, the urban environment is very much organic with the rivers surrounding it and a very important nature. The projects we've developed now on slide 24, I'd like to show a short film. So let's the film play. This was developed in actually 1996 was my first big project in doing the digital installation about New York City.
Body, city is alive. It's an organism which is moving and breathing.
We see the city as a
I think this project is about trying to give people control over how they view a map.
Projections is a collaboration by a small group of students and faculty at Parsons School of Design focused on creating an interactive map of New York City that represents the new television medium and human interface of the future. Projections designs and constructs an immersive interactive environment based on the challenges and opportunities made possible by new media. In this exhibition at SIGGRAPH 96, the borough of Manhattan has been chosen to illustrate the powerful look and feel of new digital experiences. The Projections Collaborative intends to take advantage of the incredible potential of emerging computer and audiovisual technologies. Future projects will utilize varying technical solutions appropriate to the needs of a wide variety of public, private, and institutional clients, with the primary objective of enhancing human understanding of our complex natural and man-made environments.
The screens, the sort of the physical space projections and things like that, those are just mainly limitations of the moment. What we're really thinking towards is their implementations in the future.
I think that the artistic qualities of the map help to give it its richness, and so that people can get more and more information from it, and information in ways that they're not used to getting information.
The walls between the human and the machine should come down.
It evolves into like a living organism in a sense, like it's alive. It's like another living creature in a way, or another living world.
Hello, Mustafa. We can't hear you. Just wait a minute.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's on.
I turned off the mute. I'm sorry.
It's all right. I think you should resume from after the video.
Slide 25. Yes.
Yes. Thanks.
So I wanted to describe the project was, as you could see, it was a digital interface of the city of Manhattan as the city of New York and the physical island of Manhattan as a body, as an anatomical living organism. And we developed the interface as a series of acupuncture needles that the users press to trigger these multimedia impressions. And The second generation of the project, which is the project with the circles, with the different human types, was looking at how we need to look at the city from the lens of different individuals. We studied it from a homeless person's perspective, from an elderly, from a student, from a foreigner that came to New York. We tried to look at it from every different person's point of view so we could understand how the city would be understood and comprehended, and how we could design to improve the interface of the city from the individual point of view, the sensitivity of each person culturally and their different stage of life. Slide number 26. After 9/11, we had an opportunity to look at the city. How could we develop a technology platform to protect, in a sense, to look at the city comprehensively? So we developed is called the New York City Action Alert Network, which allowed citizens to use their mobile phones as well as the city to collect data through the internet to create essentially a media wall, which you call situation wall for the Mayor Bloomberg, so that they could monitor both the citizens, which the citizens themselves became part of the system. They provided data on the ground. They're the best source of information, actually, because they become the watchdogs, what's going on, more than the police could, for example. So we developed a citizen action alert network that linked citizens with the workforce of the city, with the city government, to become one unified platform. Slide 27. I want to move into another project in Newark, New Jersey, where I had the office. The reason I moved the office into Newark was because it needs a lot of work. It's a city that has big problems. There's a very poor population. There's a lot of crime. Yet it's one of the richest cities in the country in terms of infrastructure. All of the transportation, airports, and many things come through that space. So I think the concept of infrastructure was to combine information and infrastructure into one seamless type of environment. So how could we map the systems of the infrastructure? Slide 28. So we mapped bridges and roads as if these are all data sources of information, so that we can actually tap and provide information from the infrastructure itself. 29, I'd like to move into the project we developed, which was essentially an entire signage and interactive media system for the city of Newark, where we could map all of the different touch points, both from transportation as well as the user experience. We called this also glocally. Glocally is a very good term, meaning global and local. The idea is that data is coming in from different scales, like the airport, transportation, it can be trade, it can be tourism. All of these things need to be factored into the local conditions. And so there's a collectivity between local and global. So the next stage is the next stage is the aerial on slide 20, on slide 30. We have the aerial Portropolis project, which was a very massive project to look at how could we combine and plan between the port and the airport as one integrated system. This whole project was a planning project that we developed, but we also looked at it, how could we market this to attract companies and basically leading companies to come internationally to build their businesses into Newark as a leading hub. And the Port of New Jersey, Port of New York, it is linked almost now in our plan to the airport as one mega transportation hub with a green belt and residential all around it, all the way surrounding that, to provide the workforce, to create jobs, to create a more environmentally sensitive solution, which now it's a very industrial and very harsh environment. But we tried to create jobs, plan for jobs, housing, everything within a short distance to alleviate, of course, pollution due to people driving their cars unnecessarily. So now I'd like to move into the Dubai project. So could switch to slide 32. I'm jumping from city to city. Part of my idea is to sort of give you different realities, different scales, and different ideas from different cities. The Dubai, I was lucky to open an office in Sharjah and got to work in Dubai from 2007 to 2009. Unfortunately, when the market crashed, I had to make a decision. I decided to move to China, where there was more opportunity to work on the projects that I was doing in Dubai. Unfortunately, all the projects were basically halted, as many probably of you in the audience may have also been working on projects there as well. But anyway, I think what's interesting about Dubai is that it's a city without really a center. In my opinion, it was a city of multiple centers, and the idea to create, how do we connect these multiple centers through some opportunity through technology. So slide number 33. We looked at different scales of the city, at different dimensions of the city and the different spaces of the city. Slide 34. We developed what we call the UAE Urban Identities. This was a joint venture project between American University of Sharjah, the Parsons School of Design, the Oxford Brookes University, and KAIST University is a leading technology university in Korea, South Korea. And what we ended up doing was mapping all of the heritage sites throughout the UAE, and how could we bring these back into the mainstream in terms of, because in a sense these sites were becoming marginalized because the growth, such fast urban growth happening throughout the UAE in a way was eclipsing the heritage. So the idea was, how can we bring these heritage sites back into the urban context, into the mainstream? And we were looking at using overlaying technology to create media experiences both within the heritage but also broadcast from the heritage sites so that the souk markets and the other type of cultural activities could be broadcast to different places like airports and public spaces, so that tourists and even the citizens in Dubai could feel more connected to these heritage sites. So this was a very interdisciplinary project. Can you go to slide 35? In which we worked with all the students to research and map and to document the spaces and to propose, how do we integrate this into the market economy? How do we make this a viable business model? Slide 36. The heritage areas became rich environments for the research and the cultural promotion, which is the legacy and is the content we need to promote something beyond just buildings. Buildings are limited in their content, as we know. So slide 37, the final installation built several models, physical models of these heritage sites, and they were linked together through digital media. And we developed this booth to be presented in SIGGRAPH. Truthfully, the project never was physically built, the installation. We are still seeking funding to do this project. But I think it was an important academic exercise to see how we could look at the relationship of the heritage sites within the digital, to bring them into using new media, to bring them into the 21st century. Okay, let's move on to slide 38, to Beijing. So Beijing, on the other hand, is the opposite of Dubai, which is a linear city, which is a city of no centers. Beijing is completely opposite. Maybe some of you have been here. Beijing is all based on the concentric model, with these rings radiating from the center of the ancient city, which is in the last century was the imperial palace in the Qing dynasty. The the city still has what they call the Forbidden City, which is the heart of the city. And that city, in a way, radiates the structure of the city from the center. So slide 39, I just gave a little bit of context of moving into the fabric of the city, into the historical city and the culture of the ancient culture. If you go to slide 40, we're working on the project called GeoCity with a new technology platform and Tsinghua University collaborating with Parsons School of Design. Slide 41. The project we're developing is a interactive map, immersive map, which has all of the data. We've collected data from every system, whether that's transportation, population, retail, and we've created this interactive map that uses a touch screen. Basically, we use like a pad with a pen, and the user navigates through the experience of all the data of the city. This is a real project that's going into the second generation. Slide 42, I wanted to just show quickly one of the other projects in the 798 district in Beijing, which I hope all of you can get a chance to go to. It's an amazing art district that's built in an industrial, it was an industrial yard that they converted into galleries, and it's a very vibrant, thriving cultural space with all kinds of new design and modern design and culture happening. Slide 43 is the idea of really looking at how the city as a concentric experience can connect the mobile media interface with the users that navigate through the city and through the space of 798. 798 is the name of this district, which is the name of the industrial zone called 798, but they've used this brand to create this new identity. And can go into slide 44. We've developed a big physical installation called The Flow, which is trying to connect this cultural information happening in the arts movement in Beijing with a link to New York as a digital pipeline so that we could create a streaming connection between Beijing and New York. And we know that Beijing has, in many people's mind in the West, is a closed system, and it has very, we could say, restrictions on media, especially since Google has not been able to open in Beijing due to some issues they had. But actually, Beijing wants to open to the world. I believe I'm here for 4 years now, and I think Beijing is thriving. It's wants to embrace, but we need to create connections through the digital experience to other cities. We should do that with Karachi as well. We should create a pipeline so that we can share information, ideas, and we can share media content and experiences. So this project is all about this sharing called flow of information between different cultures and different cities. So slide 44 and slide 45 is a way of mapping the digital content. We did an analysis on the different locations, how we can stream the media. Also, is it synchronized or asynchronized? There are time delays because we're in different time zones? We need to consider all of these into the actual design. So moving to slide 46, Karachi. This is the last project. Karachi is in its own right, it's a mega city. It's on population as the same as Beijing on the same scale, and it's growing every day. And the city as a port city, I like to say it has multiple identities from its ancient past to a colonial period to the present. And how do we factor in all of these different identities within the project? So let's go to slide 47, which is now we're moving into Port Grand, which is the project that I worked on as the lead designer, urban planner. And I must give credit to the developer, Shahid Feroz and Arfin Group and the Port Grand company for being so diligent to make this project a success because we ran into many problems. Number one was the infrastructure itself. We needed to rebuild the bridge, and there was a lot of infrastructure and a lot of complexity on the site. But I believe that the project has made a mark in Karachi, which is needed some signal to the world that there's some things going on there that can be more open. I'd like to go to slide 48, which was we did an extensive analysis of the geological, of the environmental conditions as well. We did our best within the resources of the site to preserve the landscape and the historical artifacts that we found. So I think that was part of the protection of the site. While we knew we have to transform the site because the site was very much a ruined port. But many ports around the world have gone through this transformation and they become vital places. So on slide 49, we can see the area analysis we conducted at different scales. As a center of many roads, as a convergence, the Port Grand area, the Neti Jetty has incredible energy from the city. And we needed to try to collect, to understand the space planning, to bring in different activities from the bridge to the park to the mosque and the gateway as a new gateway to the port. Slide 50 is just to show a little bit analyzing the systems of security, utilities, and different circulations. I was very concerned about the parking for that project, which I think is still not fully resolved, but we did look at ways to bring people through people movers on small buses that could bring people from remote parking lots into the site and help also within the site have some type of electric cars that could move people around the site. I think this will be in the next phase of the project, hopefully. So on slide 51, just a little bit, the work we did also developed the technical drawings and the design of the architecture, working with the local team. So it was very much a great collaboration between the local team to execute all the drawings with local engineers, with the New York office and eventually the office in Sharjah. I think this was a good example of an international team working together and bringing the best of East and West within the local culture. So on slide 52, just a little bit to show that there's been hopefully some good news in Karachi, that this project has finally been able to come alive and has created a vibrant space for people. We know that not everyone can afford to go there. That is a limitation. I hope in the future that the project can be affordable for everyone. I think the developer had to make a choice, at least in the beginning, to make it to have some kind of a price tag to be able to go there. But I know in the heart, we would like to make it something open to all citizens and all people. So I'd like to conclude a little bit with a view of the Earth. I think the technology we're using today is going to allow us to connect the systems, both on the macro planetary level, as well as on the individual level, whether that's mapping global environmental data or how users interact in a very localized way through GPS and through geo-specific locations. We're working on projects to bring the different scales together, and as well as different cultures, and to look at different individuals, how people need to be understood in terms of their abilities and their capacity. We can't look at a one-size-fits-all solution. We need to look at the richness of cultures, of interdisciplinary approaches that we can work together, not only architects and engineers, but we need to look at behavioral scientists. We need to look at environmental engineers and people working in the green movement. We need to work all together and cross the boundaries. I think, unfortunately, we have many barriers due to, I would say, the greed of companies that protect the intellectual property, and they're not sharing this information. But hopefully, the theme of this conference, no boundaries and no barriers, is really important, that we can manifest that on many different dimensions, not only the physical and the virtual. So thank you for letting me present many ideas, but I wanted to immerse you in all of the potential of the future. So thank you very much.
Uh,